These spiral cone vortex Helix fidget toys, they're everywhere in 3D printing right now. Just do a search, if you haven't already, on any of the 3D printing databases and you'll literally find hundreds of designs. One of my favorite makers is Joel, the 3D printing nerd, and his huge build on the Elgoose Storm, well, it's absolutely mind-blowing. Even some of my favorite designers on Patreon, STL Flicks and others, well, they've been putting out some pretty incredible models that I'm probably going to have to print soon. Now, here you can see I've printed out a few that I think look especially cool, and I'll post links to them so you can check them out for yourself. But every time I see a new spiral vortex thing pop up, there's one thing that keeps popping up in my head. How did they do that?
What don't you know?
I don't know.
Guess what? I figured it out. Well, me and a bunch of other people. But the point is, I'm going to go through a simple cone design and show you how it's done. And then once you've gotten this one down, well, what you do with it next, that's up to you.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Well, Fusion 360 is what I'm going to be using for this tutorial, and remember that if I get going too fast or something doesn't make sense, feel free to pause, rewind, or even use the speed button in YouTube. Our first step's pretty simple. We're going to create a sketch on the bottom plane, and we're going to create a circle then from the center origin point, and we're going to go out to 50 millimeters. By the way, I found that a 1:2 ratio works great for these kind of spiral toys, so a base of 50 millimeters will give us a height of 100 millimeters, and we're going to use that in the next step. After you make that circle, hit Finish Sketch, and I like to rename everything immediately, but that's up to you, and I'm going to call this sketch Outside. For step 2, we're going to need to extrude up from that outside sketch. And remember that 1:2 ratio giving us 100 millimeters in the last step? Well, here's where that comes into play. Except we don't really want to go all the way to 100 millimeters because we don't want that sharp point.
Razor sharp.
Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to extrude up to 100 millimeters, and I'll make that taper angle over there on the right at a negative 14.5 degrees. And see that sharp point? That won't print. Now you can experiment here with heights to see what you personally like, but I like to go with about 3/4 of the height, or in this case 75 millimeters. Now that's going to chop off the top, but we're going to round it over later and make it look nice, I promise. Finish that extrusion and then open up your bodies folder on the left. You're going to see that body over there, and we need to copy this body to give us the exact same one for inside and outside. You can right-click Copy on the body, or just click on it and press Control-C on the keyboard. Then you just right-click to paste, or if you did the Control-C, you might as well go ahead and do Control-V. Leave all your Move Copy settings alone and click OK. Again, I like to rename all my parts, so I'm going to rename the top body Outside and name the bottom one Inside. Also, I like to hit Save a lot, so I recommend you do that as well. Step 3 is a little more in-depth as well as more creative. Now, just like in step 1, we need to create a sketch on that bottom plane. We need to know where the outside boundary is on this next one, so be sure to unhide the outside sketch if it's not already showing up. And while you're over there, we need to hide both of the bodies that we created just to get them out of the way for now. Here's where we decide on our design. Now for this tutorial, we're going to eventually have 6 spiral arms. Our circle's 360 degrees, and divide that by our 6 arms. Well, that leaves us with 60 degrees for each arm. And to make things a little easier on ourselves, we're going to go ahead and lay out the initial 60 degrees using construction lines. So click on the line icon or press L, and then in the sketch palette, select Construction. Starting at the center origin point, you can drag up to your circle and put 25 into that distant box, but don't press Enter yet. We want to press the Tab key, and that'll take us over to the angle box. Now note that your angle straight up is 90 degrees when we need 60 total. So for that first line, we need to be 30 degrees off of 90. Going left, we're going to add 30 to get 120 and hit Enter. Now, a cool feature in CAD programming is that most boxes accept more math than I know, but this part just needs simple math, so you can always add 30 to the existing 90 and hit Enter, and that'll give you that 120. Now on the other side, make another construction line the same way, 25 millimeters, and this time we're going to go to the right, which means we're going to subtract 30, which will give you 60. Hit enter and that will finish your line. Now I like to move that little info line in the middle if it's there for you, showing that 25. Move it to the outside of where I'm working, and you can just do that simply by dragging it to the right with the left mouse button. And now, time to design. Well, there's really only two things you need to follow for this next step. The first thing to remember is the first two lines that we're going to draw from that center origin, they have to be completely perpendicular, laying right over those construction lines. And then later when we make the additional 5 spiral arms, those are going to touch and join up. And the second thing here is don't let your final design have anything going over the construction lines, at least not for this tutorial. You want to get crazy later? Go for it. How I create this is probably not the quote unquote right way, but it's simple and easy. I do recommend you zoom in a bit here. Using those measuring blocks makes it easier to keep everything lined up. And by the way, if you still have construction lines turned on, just make sure you turn that off. Click on that construction line icon in the sketch palette on the right. And I've forgotten this one way too many times.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, I start with those two straight lines I mentioned, and I'm going to make them go straight up the construction lines on either side. Both of them need to be a length of 5 millimeters. Next, we're going to click on the Fit Point Spline icon up in your toolbar at the top. This one will probably take a little playing around, so I won't feel too bad if you want to pause the video here at any point and work on that. Actually, I won't know, so go ahead. I do recommend you start with a simple design along the lines of what I'm doing. I've gone through the process a few times, but this is what I did getting started, and it turns out looking great. Using the Fit Point Spline tool, click on one of the endpoints of a line you created. Then just make some points either to the left or right of the center line, and when you get to the top, put a point directly on that center line. Then recreate what you did on the other side as close as you can. You're going to need to make sure that your final point is your beginning point because we need to close out that loop. This has the added benefit of creating a closed design with the two lines as well. And you can now press the Escape key to get out of the Fit Point Spline tool. Later, when we're making more design choices, you can click on each point you made and adjust the control arms and move things around and have fun with it. Just make sure to always leave space between your design and those construction lines, as well as the outside circle. This is the space that'll get printed, and we don't want it too thin. Now you can finish sketch and rename this sketch to Design or Arm or something like that. Your choice. Oh, and save. On to step 4, and this one's pretty quick and very important for the next step. Once again, we're going to create a sketch, but this time we're going to put it onto a side plane. I like to rotate the view cube to the front, then use that plane. Create a construction line starting from the center origin, and let's go up to the original height we chose for our design, which was 100 millimeters. And yes, I know we stopped at 75 earlier, but remember, based on that taper angle and other settings on this original height, just trust me here, it's going to make sense soon.
Well, that's asking quite a lot, but I'm sure we'll all do our best.
Finish sketch and rename it to Center Line. Well, step 5 is where we start doing magic. Not literally, but it's kind of wild how this works. Under the Create dropdown, click on Sweep. For now, we'll use these settings, but later you can experiment with them to see what crazy designs you can make. So in the Sweep info box on the right, your type should be set to single path. The profile you need to select, well, that's the design that you created. If you're still seeing the front view from making that center line, just rotate a little bit to look down from the top. Make sure your sketches are still visible and select the outline of your design. If you made those two straight lines like I did, you're going to need to make sure you select those as well. Now, if you're having trouble selecting your design, you may find it's easier to hide your outside sketch, and that's fine. Next, the path you want to select, well, that's that center line we created. Rotate your view just enough so you can see it and click on it. You should see a column rising up from your design. Keep chain selection checked and leave your distance at 1. And that distance, that's going to change how far up your path you want to go. 1's telling it to do the entire thing. Basically, 1's 100%, kind of like batting averages in baseball, which isn't important here. And the taper angle here should stay at 0, but the twist angle is where we get that awesome swirl around our design. Set the twist angle to 360 degrees for a single full revolution around our model. And now you've made modern art. Not really, but I do think it looks kind of cool. You can even use your view box and click top to look straight down and see that the top of your box, you can see that new sweep should be lined up perfectly over the original sketch at the bottom. Now note the arrow along your path. You can move this up and down to tighten up that sweep if you want. And if you want it real tight, a full 360 at that 75 millimeters, you can lower it down to that 75 millimeter edge. Now this is another one of those design choices you can make later when making your own spiral 3D prints. Well, now let's rotate back to the side a little bit for this next part so we can see things a little bit better. Orientation remains perpendicular, but we need to switch the operation down there to cut. And now unhide only the outside body. And if both are already visible, just hide the inside body. For now, we just need to be able to see the outside body. That's the one we're working on. Then all you need to do is press OK to cut your sweep out of the outside body. And more modern art. Step 6 is another pretty easy and quick one, but it'll really transform your model a lot. Under the Create drop-down, click on Pattern, and then choose the circular option. Switch the object type over to Features because we only want to use the sweep we created, not that outside body itself. For the object, you're going to want to select the inside that the cut was made by the sweep. You should see it change color on the inside, but not on the body itself. The axis we're going to use is going to once again be that center line we constructed. See how useful that little line is? You may need to unhide it in sketches though, since Fusion sometimes has a tendency to hide them. Clicking the axis on the center line should have opened up quite a few more options in your pattern box on the right. Leave distribution at full and leave the suppression box unchecked. And now remember those calculations we did at the start where we decided on 6 arms, each arm being 60 degrees total, and 6 times 60 is 360. Well, to make our sweep pattern go all the way around, we need our quantity to be 6. Leave compute type to adjust, and you can now hit OK. And just like that, you really have made some, nope, I'm not going to say modern art. I just said it. Next.
Modern art?
Modern art. Our specialty, starting now.
I don't get it.
Of course you don't.
Am I too old?
Of course you are.
Well, now that we have our outside body nearly done, we're going to need to make that inside part. So in step 7, we're going to do this using the combine feature. Go ahead and unhide the inside body alongside with the outside body. Select the Modify drop-down and then click on Combine. Your target's going to be that inside body, the one we haven't really worked on much. And the easiest way to select it is just to click its name over in the Bodies folder. The tool body is going to be on the outside, and that's the one that we're going to cut apart using Sweep and Pattern. Again, you can just select it over in the Bodies folder. For operation, you can hover your mouse over the icons and select Cut, probably in the middle. And what we're going to do is use the outside body to strip away whatever it touches on that inside body. And all that's going to be left on the inside will be the parts that will fill in those gaps on the outside. We don't want to make this a new component though, since we need it to affect the bodies we already have. And we most definitely want to keep tools, those inside and outside bodies. Once you've made sure everything is right, click OK. Now, if you hide the outside body, you'll see that the inside body only has the parts that will fit perfectly into the outside body, and vice versa. Just a few more quick steps and we're going to be ready to print. As you can see, the inside body's completely flush up against that outside body, and you've probably already wondered about how that's going to print. Well, FYI, it won't. Print it now and you're going to have a solid block. To get that awesome sliding action that we want, we're going to need to make an adjustment here. Fortunately, Fusion can do this in step 8 with a single simple command, Offset Faces. Under the Modify drop-down, click on Offset Face. Now we can only do this on the outside body due to the way the geometry of it all works, but if we did the inside, we'd create a hole down the center, and that's not going to be good. So for now, let's just hide that inside body. Now we do want to just offset the inside portion of those cuts, not the outside faces. So go around your model and select all 6 of the inside edges of those parts. Depending on your original design, occasionally the top and bottom of these cuts may be separated, so make sure you've got the entire thing. And you may find it easier to just rotate to the bottom and select those inside parts from there. I'm personally printing on a Bamboo P1S for this, and I found that somewhere around a -0.5 that's a pretty good offset for smooth sliding, and you may need to adjust this for your printer if you have any issues. But for now, we're going to make this offset -0.5. But wait, don't hit OK yet, because if you do, it might not work. Fusion needs to see, for some reason, the inside body while it's doing this command, so unhide the inside body before you do anything else. Now you can hit OK. Once that finishes, you can zoom in a bit and you should see a pretty well-defined gap between your bodies. Well, you've also probably been wondering about those sharp tips at the top, haven't you? We all know that a sharp tip probably isn't going to print well, if at all. And after we did our offset, well, that just made things worse. Never fear, step 9 is here. First, let's hide that inside body again. Under the Construct drop-down, select Offset Plane. You should see your origin planes light up under your model. Choose the bottom plane that's flat with your model's base like we did previously. Next, you need to drag that plane up using the blue arrow. Now this part's a little subjective on how far you want to go. What we're going to do is use the offset plane to chop off the tips of our outside body. We want as much body to remain as we can get without leaving it too pointy. Now I'm going to go for 10 millimeters below our top measurement of 75 millimeters and then hit OK. Now to chop those tops off, open the Modify drop-down and click Split Body. The body to split is obviously our outside body. You can just click it or click on it in your bodies folder. The splitting tool is that new offset plane that we created where I put it at 65 millimeters. You can hit OK and you'll see a bunch of new bodies pop up in the bodies folder. These are those tips that we cut off and you can turn those all off. We won't need them again. You can also hide your construction plane by clicking the eyeball next to the construction folder. Well, now that we have the tips trimmed down, we have another problem. I personally don't like the tops of those arms looking so flat and straight, at least not for this project. So it's time for something new, to this project at least. Press the F key to open up the fillet command, or you can find it under the Modify drop-down. We need to select only the inside part of each arm. Now mine are coming to a point and we'll need to select 2 parts for each arm on either side of that inside point. We don't want to select anything actually going down the arm. We're just selecting that line on either side, making the edge at the very top. Go around each arm until you get them all selected. Now if you find you selected something wrong along the way, just select it and that'll deselect it. You should probably end up with 12 edges selected like I did, as you're going to see in the fillet info box. Now you'll need to either enter in an amount for the fillet or drag that control. It'll probably help to zoom in on at least one of the tips so you can see it a little bit better. I found it's easier to enter in the number since it's such a small increment. You'll need to play around with your numbers, but start small. If you get an error, keep decreasing your number. What we're looking for here is to round over the tip of that arm until the fillet completely fills up that flat area on top. Well, if you increase too far, get an error, just back up one number, and then you can start adding a second number alongside it if you want to get even finer details. It's up to you on how detailed you want to be with it. Now you'll see that fillet on the back, those 2 edges, those have now rounded over the front face and made it look so much nicer. One more step and we're going to be finished. In step 10, we're going to do something about that flat top. And just like the sharp tips we fixed, we're going to use the fillet command. Now, a quick note here, every once in a while I see that my top edge isn't a complete circle. It'll be intersected by cuts from the sweep, and I won't be able to use the fillet command to round over the top. And what that means is my initial 2 lines, you remember in the design, well, they weren't quite long enough. It's really quick and easy at this point to go back on our timeline, edit the design, and then change those 2 lines. You can just click on the number 5, what we have right now, and then change it to a longer value. When you have that perfect round circle around the flat top, press F for the fillet command and select that circle edge. Now it's just a matter of adjusting the fillet until it's completely rounded over. With my design, I got it around somewhere around 7.237. You don't have to be as precise as that if you don't want to. Also, I've played with a chamfer here, which then creates two edges, and both of those can be rounded over with fillets. It's up to you. So now hit OK when you're done, and that's it. To get your model exported, you have some choices to make. You can move one of your bodies to the side and export them together as one STL file. You can hide a body, export the visible one as an STL, then repeat the process with the other body, giving you two STL files. Or you can leave it all as is and export a 3MF. And then once you drop your 3MF file in your slicer, you can have it separate the bodies and arrange as needed. I personally prefer the 3MF file. Just be sure your slicer doesn't import as a single object. By the way, I like to have my slicer set to print by object instead of the normal by layer. This is also called sequential printing. This way I can print one body at a time, and that allows for a filament change, and that works even on if you have a printer that only has one color. You can put in a pause command before it starts the second body. Now if you want to know more about sequential printing, you can check out my video. Then the only other thing to do is decide on filament colors. Printing these are pretty quick and easy, especially at this size. And you shouldn't need any supports for any of these, especially this design. Also, I printed most of these at a standard 0.2 millimeter setting using a 0.4 millimeter nozzle. I'm still amazed at how these things work, and I made this one myself. Please like, subscribe, and share, and I'll leave links to everything I mentioned in the description. I really hope this helps you get the creative juices going and make some awesome prints, and let us all know how they turned out. And let's support each other in and out of our own 3D print labs as we learn, create spiral vortex things, and amaze.